Hi, this is a foreigner in the Philippines. Well, one of the most common little qualities, if you can call it that, of a humble man, someone who exercises humility, is self-effacing humour. And like all things, it's really best to have a fine balance on this. Too much self-effacing humour is not a good thing for you because people start to take you seriously. So the next time you think of a good joke which puts you down, think again, because people take you at your own evaluation. That's a really important thing to remember. People take you at your own evaluation. And if you keep putting yourself down, it begins to get a habit. It gets a habit, and then guess what? Remember what I always say is that it's as if we have an inner voice which is also an inner pair of ears, and it's listening to you. And it's listening to what you say is your evaluation of you. And if you keep saying bad things about yourself, it's listening. And as it listens, it is doing as you say, to bring in experiences into your life which will reflect and make right those statements which you commonly say about yourself. So if you keep saying, yeah, well, I'm useless at all that, guess what? It will do things which prove that you are indeed useless at all that. So does this mean that you have to go over onto what I think of as a strongly American characteristic, aspect of character, and that is arrogance? I always think and always thought when I was in America that there is a taught level of arrogance. And how this is cultivated is in the need to stand up and say that you're very good at what you do. And it kind of goes over so that you keep saying that you're very good at everything. Well, no one's good at everything. So that's why I say that there's a fine line, there's a fine balance. Now, when I used to teach someone who was interested in improving his musicianship, and I used to teach him, and one of the biggest barriers to his learning was his arrogance, and that was that he already knew. So here's the common formula for learning. In order for learning to take place, the component parts of learning are this. There has to be a pupil or a student willing to learn, a teacher willing to teach. And it's a very simple set of ingredients. Teacher who's willing to teach and a student who's willing to learn. That equals a lesson. And then it's down to the teacher doing his job and the student doing his. And both have a job to do. Now, it's a very common thing that when a person who is accomplished in one area goes into learning about another area, that he will take with him his sense of personal accomplishment in the area in which he is presently skilled, and he'll take it with him, wearing it like a coat or a hat, into this area where he is only a student. He's a child. And that becomes the biggest barrier to his actually learning, or learning as quick as he could do, because he starts to question everything. Well, you can't question everything when you first start to learn about anything, about life, about, I don't know, about geography, history, skills, about how to do things. You have to accept the place that you're at, and gets us back to the old point zero. Your point zero changes as soon as you become a student of anything. As soon as you start to learn about anything, your point zero changes, because now you don't know everything. You have to accept that you are a beginner in that particular area. Now, if you're a very fine guitar player and you decide that you want to learn a brass instrument, you're no longer a very fine anything, because a brass instrument is completely different to a string instrument. Now you have to accept that you are just a student. Now, in real life, this also is the thing to remember, is that when you listen to someone who is very good at, I don't know, at being an electrician, and you're not, then listen in order to learn. He has to be willing to teach you, and you have to be willing to learn. Now, say in electrics, when I was doing contracting work in the UK, I reached a point where I was just tired of doing music, and I started to do contracting work because I had an aptitude for carpentry and design. So that's what I did, and I used to earn money, and it was easy to do that for me. But I didn't know anything about electrics. Well, this is where a teacher willing to teach and a student willing to learn comes in. There were two people that I could talk to, and I have given this example before. One was not really willing to teach, because when I called him, and I didn't call him too many times because I learned very quickly that he was not willing to teach, I would tell him, look, I've got this job and it requires me to do some electrics, and I have to put in a ring main. You're going to do that yourself? You're going to do the electrics on a ring main? Are you kidding me? Well, no, I'm not kidding you, and I'm sure that if you were to tell me how to do it, then I'd be able to do it, I said. Well, okay, and that's how it went. So, in other words, I didn't call him again. Now, I also knew another man who was clever at electrics, and he also had a sense of humour. I'd call him up and say, Tone, I have a ring main to do. I need a bit of know-how here. And he'd say, okay, it's a ring main? All right, here's what we do. How many outlets? And I would tell him how many outlets. And he'd say, okay, write this down. This is the cable that you need to have in order to install a ring main. It must be a certain strength, it must be, and then he would give me the details, and I would write those down. And then I would give him the dimensions of the kitchen, he'd tell me how much cable I would need, and so on. In other words, he made it possible for me to be a student and learn the lesson by being willing to be a teacher and teach. So, when you start to go into being a student, and this takes us back to the first point I made, that people are willing to accept you at your own evaluation. If you place your evaluation of yourself at a reasonable level, not too much humility and not too much arrogance, one in which someone will be willing to step up and teach you something about what they know. Now, that depends on how you have set your arrogance compared to your humility. In other words, you have to be willing to listen and then say, I know this much, can you teach me from here? Well, any good teacher will take it, especially if it's some skill, they'll take it from the beginning. Okay, And this is how I would do it if I was trying to tell something, teach someone about something that I knew. I would say, I don't know how much you know, so let's run through the beginning fairly quickly until you reach a point where you need to slow down and take some of the information in a little more clearly. And that's how we'd go. I'd give examples and I would be willing to teach. And if the person was willing to listen, he'd learn something. And same goes for me if I was asking someone to teach me. My own evaluation of myself is that I'm reasonably intelligent, have a good aptitude for most doing things, and that's how I would approach questioning someone about how to do something. But I wouldn't go in with a level of such arrogance that the guy would think to himself, I'm not going to teach this guy anything because he already knows everything. So that brings you to the common description of someone who knows everything, and that is a know-it-all. Now, one of the quickest ways to kill a conversation in which you might learn something is to appear a know-it-all. So, temper your assessment of yourself to a point that is realistic, and you will find that people will be willing to impart their skill and knowledge to you. Don't be too humble. Don't be too arrogant. There is an ideal balance, and that is the one that will serve you the most. Also, that is the one which will serve your inner voice and ears. In other words, you won't be putting yourself down, neither will you be overestimating what you can do. Because if you're overestimating what you can do, you're going to come unstuck. And that's no great pleasure. So, remember, people accept you at your own evaluation. So, don't call yourself a genius if you're not, and don't call yourself an idiot if you're not. That's my late night thought. Hope it's of some use to you. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. Bye for now.